Ambassador stood before the great window of her office and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the peaceful glow of Prime's 3 moons, her people were dying. She could not see the death. She could not hear the screams. But she knew they were happening, and the knowledge sat in her chest like a stone. They had lived among the stars for 8,000 years. They had built 12 beautiful worlds. They had created art that made other species weep with joy. They had mapped trade routes across half the galaxy and welcomed all who came in peace. They had never built a warship. They had never trained a soldier. Why would they? The Galactic Concord existed to keep peace. The elder races had promised protection to all who joined their community. Those promises meant nothing now. The Dominion had come without warning. Their ships appeared at the edge of space like a swarm of black insects, blocking out the stars. They did not negotiate. They did not explain. They simply attacked. Had watched the recordings from 7, the first colony to fall. She wished she had not. They moved through cities like farmers harvesting grain. They took everything: resources, technology, people. What they could not take, they burned. The beautiful crystal towers of 7, which had taken 300 years to grow, collapsed into ash in a single afternoon. Now 5 colonies were gone, 5 worlds silent, millions of her people taken or killed, and the fleet continued to advance, slowly and steadily, toward the where now stood. She had done everything an ambassador could do. She had contacted every species she knew. She had begged for help. She had offered trade agreements, territory, anything they wanted. The responses had broken her heart. The Federation expressed deep concern and offered counseling services for refugees. The collective sent their thoughts and prayers. The great elder races of the Galactic Concord held emergency meetings and issued strongly worded statements of condemnation. They imposed economic sanctions on the Dominion, which they ignored completely because they did not trade. They simply took. No one sent ships. No one sent soldiers. No one was willing to fight. "Ambassador," her assistant said from the doorway. Young looked as exhausted as felt. "The Council is asking for another update." "Tell them what I told them yesterday," replied without turning from the window. "And the day before. Nothing has changed. No one is coming." There was one response you have not seen yet." Something in his voice made turn around. The young's eyes were wide, confused, perhaps even frightened. "What response?" "From the outer regions, a species called humans. They received our distress signal." Searched her memory. Humans. She had heard the name before in some report about newly spacefaring civilizations. They were young, so young they had only left there within the last 200 years. They had a handful of exploration vessels and some basic orbital platforms. They were children in galactic terms, barely able to walk among the stars. "What do they want?" asked. She expected the usual expressions of sympathy, perhaps an offer to accept a few refugees. Handed her a data tablet. "They asked questions, Ambassador, many questions, strange questions." Read the message. Her confusion grew with each line. The humans wanted to know the exact size of the fleet. They wanted technical specifications of weapons systems. They asked about the Dominion's supply lines, their command structure, their standard tactical formations. They requested detailed maps of space, including the locations of all asteroid fields, gas giants, and navigational hazards. These were not the questions of diplomats. These were the questions of generals. "They cannot be serious," said quietly. "They have no military. They have no experience with interstellar warfare. What could they possibly do?" "Should I ignore them?" asked. Stared at the message for a long moment. She thought about all the powerful species who had turned away, who had more ships and soldiers than humanity could ever dream of, who had decided that they were not worth the trouble. And here were these children, these newcomers, asking questions as if they intended to actually do something. "No," said. "I will respond personally. Prepare a full intelligence package, everything we know about the Ambassador. They cannot help us. They are too weak, too young. They asked, interrupted. No one else asked. They wanted to know what they would be facing. That means they are thinking about facing it. She sat down at her communication terminal and began to compose a response. She told the humans everything: the horror of the attacks, the failure of the conquered, the desperate situation of her people. She attached all the military data she had, every scan and report and analysis. At the end, she added a simple question: "Can you help us?" The response came within hours. It was short, written in simple words that somehow carried more weight than all the eloquent speeches of the elder races. "How long can you hold?" Consulted with her military advisors, such as they were, scientists and security officers who had never imagined they would need to fight a war. Their estimates were grim: 3 months, perhaps 4, before the reached prime. After that, it would be over quickly. She sent her answer. The human response arrived: 5 words that would change everything. "Hold for 6, we're coming." Read the message 3 times. She did not understand. Humanity had no fleet. Building warships took years, decades. Training soldiers took even longer. The idea that these young humans could assemble any meaningful force in 6 months was absurd. It was impossible. And yet, something in those 5 words made her feel, for the first time in months, a tiny spark of something she had almost forgotten: hope. She did not know that across the galaxy, on a small blue world called Earth, her message was spreading like fire. She did not know that humans had a long and terrible history of fighting, and an even longer history of coming together when the cause was right. She did not know about the factories that were already changing their production lines, the volunteers who were already signing up by the millions, the old enemies who were already setting aside their differences. She knew only that someone, somewhere, had answered her call. Ambassador stood before the great window of her office and watched the stars. They were coming. Death was coming. But so was something else, something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity was coming. Captain was eating breakfast in the officers' mess of the UEC Resolute when the distress signal arrived. She listened to it 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her hands. The voice was alien, soft, musical, and absolutely terrified. "Please, anyone, we are dying." Had served in the United Earth Coalition Navy for 23 years. She had fought in the Martian insurrection, where colonists had rebelled against Earth's government. She had seen what happened when powerful people decided that weaker people did not matter. She had watched children die because the powerful had chosen to ignore their suffering. She forwarded the message to Earth Command with a single recommendation: respond immediately. What happened next should have been impossible. Earth in the year 2347 was not a united world. The North American Federation had been arguing with the European Union about mining rights on Europa for decades. The Asian coalition still had not forgiven the African states for the water disputes of the previous century. Old grudges ran deep. Old wounds had never healed. But the distress call spread across the planet in hours. News networks broadcast the desperate plea of Ambassador. Social media erupted with discussions about a species most humans had never heard of, and something strange began to happen. People got angry. Not angry at each other. Humans were always angry at each other about something. This was different. This was anger at the who killed without mercy. This was anger at the elder races who watched and did nothing. This was anger at the universe itself, which allowed such things to happen. The president of the North American Federation called an emergency session. Before she could finish her opening statement, she received a message from the premier of the Asian coalition. He wanted to coordinate their response. An hour later, the European Union joined the conversation, then the African states, then everyone else. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth was talking about the same thing. Admiral James stood before the United Nations Emergency Council and laid out the situation in simple terms. The needed military help. The Dominion was a serious threat. No other species was willing to fight. Humanity could either watch another civilization die or they could do something about it. "What can we do?" asked the Indian representative. "We have no interstellar warships. We have never fought a space battle. We do not even know if our weapons would work against the—" "Then we build warships," Admiral replied. "We learn to fight space battles. We make our weapons work. In 6 months. In 6 months." The room exploded with objections. It was impossible. It was insane. It would bankrupt the global economy. It would require cooperation on a scale humanity had never achieved. Admiral waited for the noise to die down. Then he said something that would be remembered for centuries. "They asked for our help. Not because we are strong, we are not. Not because we are wise, we are not that either. They asked because everyone else said no. They asked because they had no other hope. And I believe that if we say no as well, if we let them die because helping them is too hard, then we do not deserve to call ourselves human." The vote was unanimous. Earth would go to war. What followed was the greatest mobilization in human history. Factories that had built cars began building ship components. Universities that had studied peaceful sciences began researching weapons. Mining operations across the solar system increased their output by 300%. Shipyards that had never built anything larger than a cargo vessel began constructing warships. And the people came. They came by the millions, volunteers from every nation, every background, every walk of life. Farmers and teachers and doctors and engineers, all offering to serve in whatever way they could. They filled the training camps faster than the military could build them. They overwhelmed the recruitment centers with their applications. Private, age 19, had been studying agriculture in Nigeria. She enlisted on the first day and told the recruitment officer she wanted to fight. "Why?" the officer asked. He had asked the same question 1,000 times that day. "Because someone needs help," replied, "and I can give it." That answer, or something like it, was given millions of times across the planet. The humans did not know if they could win. They did not know if their hastily built ships would survive their first battle. They did not know if their untested weapons would even scratch the— but they knew they were going to try. Captain, now promoted to Commodore, oversaw the construction of the first true human warship, the UEC Defiance. She watched it take shape in the orbital shipyard, ugly and brutal and bristling with weapons. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. But it was built for one purpose and one purpose only: to fight. 6 months after this desperate call, Commodore stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at the fleet that had assembled around her. 3,000 ships of various sizes, from massive dreadnoughts to small attack craft. Many of them were converted civilian vessels, cargo haulers with weapons bolted to their hulls, passenger liners transformed into troop transports, mining ships armored with whatever metal could be found. It was not a proper military fleet. It was a collection of anything that could fly and fight, crewed by people who had been civilians just months before. By any reasonable standard, it should have been a joke. But there were 3,000 of them. 3,000 ships, carrying 10 million soldiers, all traveling to fight a war that was not their own. Opened a channel to the entire fleet. "Today we leave our home," she said. "Many of us will not return. We go to fight for people we have never met, against an enemy we have never seen, in a war that we did not start. Some would call us fools. Some would call us reckless. I call us human, because this is what we do. When someone cries out for help, we answer. When someone tells us the fight is hopeless, we fight anyway. When the universe says that the weak must suffer and the strong must rule, we disagree." She paused, looking out at the stars. "They asked for 6 months. We gave them 6 months. Now we give them everything else. All hands prepare for jump." 3,000 ships activated their engines. 3,000 crews braced for the journey. 3,000 vessels, each carrying a piece of humanity's answer to a desperate prayer, leaped into the void. The Dominion had conquered 17 species. They had never met humans before. They were about to. War Prince had conquered 11 worlds himself. He had broken the spirits of species far older and wiser than the. He had earned his title through blood and fire, through the screams of the defeated and the silence of the dead. Nothing surprised him anymore. But the reports from his scouts surprised him. "Check your sensors again," he ordered. "The numbers cannot be correct." "We have checked them 3 times, War Prince. The readings are accurate." Looked at the data again. According to his scouts, a fleet was approaching space. A large fleet. A very large fleet. And it was coming from the region of space where a young species called humans lived. This made no sense. They had studied the humans before beginning their campaign against the. They always studied potential threats. The humans had been dismissed immediately. They had been spacefaring for only 200 years. They had no military tradition in space. Their fleet consisted of a few dozen exploration vessels and some orbital defense platforms. They were bobbies. They were not worth worrying about. And yet, according to these reports, they were sending over 3,000 warships to defend the. Where did they get 3,000 warships? Demanded. No one could answer him. Meanwhile, in space, Ambassador received a different kind of surprise. The first human ship arrived 4 months after their initial message, not a warship, but a small transport carrying 20 soldiers. They called themselves advisors. Their leader was a man named Colonel James, a tall human with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much death. "We are here to help you prepare," he told the council. "The fleet is coming, but they need time. We need to make sure you can hold until they arrive." They did not understand what preparing meant. They had no army, no weapons, no experience with war. What could 20 humans possibly teach them? Everything as it turned out. Colonel began with simple questions. What resources did they have? What was the terrain of their remaining worlds like? Where were the places that could be defended, and where were the places that should be abandoned? The council was horrified by that last question. "We cannot abandon our people," the council leader protested. "We must protect everyone." Shook his head slowly. "You cannot protect everyone. That is the first lesson of war. You must choose what matters most and fight for that. Everything else you sacrifice. That is barbaric. That is survival." Over the following weeks, the humans taught the concepts they had no words for. Guerrilla warfare, small groups striking the enemy and disappearing before they could respond. Scorched earth, destroying resources rather than letting them fall into enemy hands. Strategic retreat, giving up ground to gain time. Ambush, sabotage, misdirection. They were scholars. They were builders. They had spent 8,000 years creating beauty and knowledge. Now these strange humans were teaching them how to destroy, how to hide, how to fight dirty. "This is not honorable," a young officer said during one training session. "We would be fighting like cowards." Private, no relation to the colonel, was teaching the class. She was barely 20 years old, but she had already completed more combat training than any would receive in a lifetime. "Honor does not win wars," she said. "Survival wins wars. They do not care about your honor. They care about killing you and taking your worlds. Would you rather die honorably or live to rebuild?" The young officer had no answer. Slowly, something began to change. Civilians learned to hide supply caches in places they would never find. Scientists designed simple weapons that could be built quickly and used by anyone. Communication networks went underground, invisible to sensors. The beautiful, peaceful began to transform into something harder, something that could fight. When they attacked the 7th colony, they expected the usual quick victory. Instead, they found a nightmare. They did not stand and fight in the open. They vanished. They struck from hidden positions and melted away before they could respond. They destroyed their own factories rather than let them be captured. They led forces into traps, into ambushes, into killing fields. They took the colony eventually. They always did. But it took them 3 times longer than expected, and they paid for every step with blood. War Prince received the reports with growing unease. They were fighting differently. They were fighting like humans, he realized. The human advisors had changed everything. These soft, peaceful creatures had been taught to bare their teeth, and they were learning fast. And then came the day when long-range sensors detected the human fleet entering space. Was on the command platform when the first ships appeared. Points of light blossomed at the edge of the system, each one representing a vessel exiting faster than light travel. 10 ships, then 100, then 1,000. They kept coming. The officers watched in stunned silence as the numbers climbed. 2,000, 3,000. The sensors struggled to count them all because there were so many, packed so close together. "Impossible," someone whispered. Colonel stood beside, his weathered face showing the smallest hint of a smile. "We told you we were coming," he said. Stared at the display. The ships were not beautiful. They were rough, ugly things, clearly built in haste. Some of them still had construction scaffolding attached. Some of them were obviously converted civilian vessels, their original shapes distorted by weapons and armor. They looked like something a child might build from scrap metal. But there were so many of them, so impossibly many. "How?" asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "How did you build so many ships in 6 months?" Smile faded. His eyes grew distant, remembering something painful. "We are very good at war, Ambassador. We have been practicing for a very long time. We just usually practice on each other." A communication signal arrived from the lead ship. Opened the channel, and a human face appeared on her screen. A woman, middle-aged, with sharp eyes and a jaw set in determination. "Ambassador," the woman said, "I am Admiral Wei, commander of the United Earth Coalition Fleet. We apologize for the delay. We came as fast as we could." Tried to speak. She tried to thank them, to express the overwhelming gratitude that was flooding through her. But no words came. After months of begging for help, after watching her people die while the galaxy did nothing, after losing hope so many times, someone had actually come. She did the only thing she could do. She lowered her head in the traditional gesture of deepest respect and gratitude. "We see you," she said, using the ancient words of her people. "We see you, and we will never forget." Admiral nodded solemnly. "We see you too, Ambassador. Now, let us discuss how we are going to win this war." War Prince had commanded the Dominion's greatest fleet for 30 years. He had destroyed civilizations that had existed for. He had faced enemies with superior technology, superior numbers, superior everything, and he had broken them all. They did not win because they were better. They won because they never stopped. They won because they made their enemies pay such a terrible price for every victory that eventually the enemies simply gave up. No one had ever made the give up. Looked at the human fleet and felt something he had not felt in decades. Doubt. The humans should not have been able to build this fleet. The mathematics said it was impossible. A species needed generations to develop true military capability, to build the shipyards, train the officers, create the doctrine. The humans had done it in 6 months. They had gone from a handful of exploration vessels to a force that rivaled his own through sheer, impossible effort. But numbers alone did not win wars. They had experience. They had discipline. They had centuries of conquest behind them. These humans were amateurs, flying ships that looked like they might fall apart at any moment. "Begin the attack," ordered. "Show them what real warriors can do." The Battle of Prime began at dawn on the below. The fleet advanced in their traditional formation, a wall of warships, each one supporting its neighbors, each one a link in an unbreakable chain. It was a formation that had crushed 17 species. It was perfect. The humans did not form a wall. They scattered, splitting into hundreds of small groups that darted and weaved through space like insects. They fired at them, but hitting the small, fast-moving groups was difficult. And while they were trying to hit them, the humans were hitting back. Human weapons were not elegant. They were not sophisticated. They were brutal, simple kinetic projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds, missiles packed with enough explosives to crack a moon, energy weapons that overloaded shields through raw power rather than clever frequencies. The first ship exploded within an hour of the battle's start. Watched it happen and felt his doubt grow stronger. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had faced before. They took risks that should have been suicidal, diving straight at vessels, absorbing damage that should have destroyed them, refusing to retreat even when their ships were burning around them. One human cruiser, its engines failing and its weapons nearly depleted, rammed directly into a battleship. Both ships died in the collision, but the human crew had transmitted a final message before impact, broadcast across all frequencies for everyone to hear. For the 3 words, and in those 3 words understood something terrible. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting because they could not accept any other choice. They would rather die than let them take another life. They would rather burn than back down. The battle raged for 9 days. They killed many human ships. Their superior experience showed. Their formations were, their coordination better, their commanders more skilled. For every vessel that fell, 3 human ships died. But the humans did not stop. They kept coming. When one ship was destroyed, 2 more took its place. When an attack failed, they regrouped and attacked again. They learned from their mistakes with terrifying speed, adapting their tactics hour by hour, becoming more dangerous with every engagement. Private served on a troop transport called the Rising Dawn. She was not a pilot or a gunner, she was a ground soldier, waiting for her chance to fight on a planet's surface. All she could do was watch the battle through the ship's external cameras and wait. On the 4th day, an attack destroyed the transport next to them, the Morning Star, carrying 8,000 soldiers. Watched it happen, watched the ship break apart, watched the tiny figures of her fellow humans spilling into the void. 8,000 lives gone in seconds. No one on the Rising Dawn spoke for hours. On the 7th day, Admiral Wei made a decision that would be studied in military academies for centuries. The fleet had formed a defensive position around their command ship, creating a fortress of interlocking fire that no attack could penetrate. The battle had become a stalemate. Gathered her senior officers for a final briefing. "We cannot break their formation with conventional tactics," she said. "They will simply outlast us. We need to force them to move, to abandon their position. I am open to suggestions." A young officer named Lieutenant Park spoke up. "Admiral, their command ship is well protected, but their supply lines are not. If we ignore the main fleet entirely and strike at their logistics, they will pursue us," another officer interrupted. "We would be running away." "We would be making them chase us," Park corrected. "And while they chase us, they would not be protecting Prime." Studied the tactical display for a long moment. Then she smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "Lieutenant Park, you have just earned a promotion. All ships, prepare for Operation Scattered Stars." The next day, the human fleet did something they had never seen before. They retreated, not in defeat but in organized groups, scattering in every direction away from Prime. And as they scattered, they attacked, not the warships but the supply convoys, the fuel depots, the ammunition stores. War Prince faced an impossible choice. He could hold his position and watch his logistics collapse, or he could break formation and pursue. He chose to pursue. It was exactly what Admiral had wanted. The moment the fleet scattered, it lost its greatest strength, its coordination. Individual ships were powerful, but they were not invincible. The small human attack groups swarmed them, attacking from every direction, overwhelming their defenses through sheer numbers. On the ninth day, looked at the remains of his fleet. He had started with 2,000 ships. He had fewer than 600 left. The humans had lost more, but they had started with more, and reinforcements were still arriving from Earth. For the first time in his life, War Prince gave an order he had never imagined giving. All ships retreat. The fled Prime stood on the observation deck of the Rising Dawn and watched them go, watched the invincible dominion running from a species they had never heard of 6 months ago. Around her, soldiers were cheering, crying, embracing each other. They had won. The cost had been terrible. Over 1,000 human ships destroyed, millions of soldiers dead, families on Earth who would never see their loved ones again. But they were safe. The still spun peacefully below, its cities intact, its people alive. Thought about her father, Colonel James, who was somewhere on the surface with the resistance fighters. She thought about the 8,000 soldiers on the Morning Star who had died so that others could live. She thought about all the people who had volunteered, knowing they might never return, because someone far away had asked for help. Was it worth it? Someone asked beside her, a young private barely 18, tears streaming down his face. Considered the question. She thought about everything they had lost, everything they had sacrificed. Then she looked at Prime, alive and whole and free. Yes, she said, it was worth it. The news of the Battle of Prime spread across the galaxy like fire across dry grass. On 1,000 worlds, species who had never heard of humanity suddenly learned their name. They learned about the desperate call for help, the 6 months of impossible preparation, the fleet that should not have existed. They learned about the farmers and teachers and doctors who had become soldiers, about the ships held together with hope and determination, about the species that had crossed the stars to defend strangers. The Galactic Concord called an emergency assembly. Representatives from every major civilization gathered in the Great Hall on Nexus Station, and for the first time in centuries, there was only one topic of discussion. The humans. Ambassador stood before the assembly as the official representative of the people. Beside her was Admiral Wei, still wearing the uniform she had worn during the battle, still carrying the weight of all the lives lost under her command. This is unprecedented, the representative said. His people were ancient and wise, and they had not fought a war in 10,000 years. A young species, interfering in conflicts that do not concern them, disrupting the balance of power. They were dying, Admiral interrupted. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. Your balance of power was watching them die. The Concord has procedures, the representative said, diplomatic channels, proper methods for resolving conflicts. Violence should always be the last resort. For you, it was not even the last resort. It was not a resort at all. Met this multiple eyes without flinching. You watched the slaughter innocent people for months. You sent thoughts and prayers while cities burned. You had the power to help and you chose not to use it. Silence fell over the assembly. The eldest of the elder races, a being so ancient that no one remembered its original name, finally spoke. Its voice was like wind through leaves, soft and rustling. You have upset everything, young ones. They have never been defeated before. Other species they have conquered will hear of this. They will wonder if they too could resist. They will wonder if they too could fight back. Good, said simply. You do not understand. This could lead to chaos, wars across the galaxy, the peace we have maintained for. Your peace, interrupted, speaking for the first time. Her voice was different now than it had been months ago. Harder, stronger. Your peace meant nothing to my people. Your peace allowed them to grow strong while everyone else grew weak. Your peace is built on the bodies of those you chose not to protect. The ancient being regarded her with something that might have been surprise. You have changed, Ambassador. You are not the same gentle scholar who begged for our help. I learned, replied. The humans taught me that peace without the will to defend it is not peace at all. It is simply waiting to be conquered. The assembly continued for hours. Many of the elder races were afraid of what humanity represented, a challenge to their careful order, a force that could not be controlled or predicted. Some openly suggested that humanity should be sanctioned, contained, prevented from growing any stronger. It was the youngest species, those who had been too weak to join the conquered's protected ranks, those who had lived in fear of predators like the who spoke in humanity's defense. They asked for nothing, the delegate from Sorrel Prime said. They had been conquered by a century ago and had only recently won their freedom. They did not demand payment or territory or submission. They simply saw suffering and chose to end it. When has any elder race done the same? No one answered. In the end, no sanctions were imposed. Humanity was granted provisional membership in the Galactic Concord, not because the elder races wanted them, but because they had no choice. Humanity had proven something that could not be ignored. They were willing to fight, and they were able to win. After the assembly, Admiral found Colonel James in the observation deck, watching the stars. "It is over," she said. "We won, they are safe, they are retreating, and somehow we did not start an interstellar war." Nodded slowly, "For now." "You think they will come back?" "Maybe, maybe not the specifically, but someone. There are always more predators." He turned to face her. "But now those predators know something they did not know before. They know that if they attack the weak, humanity will answer. They know there is a cost." On Prime, they were beginning to rebuild. The cities that had been damaged in the resistance were being repaired. The refugees from the lost colonies were being resettled. Monuments were being planned, monuments to the humans who had died defending a people they had never met. Private walked through the capital city with her father. She was 20 years old. She had seen more death in 6 months than most would see in a lifetime. She was tired and sad and somehow also proud. "Do you regret it?" she asked, "coming here fighting this war?" Colonel was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the soldiers he had trained, the plans he had made, the lives that had been lost because of choices he had helped make. "No," he said finally, "I regret the deaths, I regret the pain, but I do not regret coming. Some things are worth fighting for even if you might lose." A child approached them, a small thing with wide eyes and delicate limbs. She looked up at the two humans with something like wonder. "Are you the ones who saved us?" she asked. Knelt down to meet the child's eyes. "We helped, but your people saved yourselves, we just gave you time." The child considered this. Then she hugged his leg with her thin arms. "Thank you," she whispered. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She thought about all the reasons she had enlisted, the anger at injustice, the desire to help, the simple belief that sitting by while others suffered was wrong. She thought about the friends she had lost, the horrors she had witnessed, the nightmares she would carry forever. And she thought about this child, alive and safe and free, because humans had chosen to answer a call for help. "You are welcome," she said. Across the galaxy the word spread. Humans were strange. Humans were dangerous. Humans were unpredictable. But if you were in trouble, if you were desperate, if no one else would help, humans might answer. The elder races worried about what this meant for the future. The predator species wondered if their hunting days were numbered. The weak and the vulnerable dared to hope for the first time in centuries. Ambassador, in her final report to the new Galactic Assembly, was asked to summarize humanity in a single statement. She thought about everything she had seen: the impossible fleet, the terrible battle, the soldiers who had died for strangers, the young species that had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. "We called out into the void," she said, "hoping someone would care. We never imagined anyone would care that much." The stars continued to turn. The galaxy continued to spin. And somewhere, a young species called humanity continued to watch the skies, ready to answer the next call for help. Because that was what humans did. When someone needed them, they came.